Welcome back to Wake Up with Nubian Tigers Talk, a podcast brought to you by a group of Black Princetonians where we talk about issues impacting our Black and Brown communities. My name is Michelle Jacobs, and I'm here as always with my wonderful co-host, Ray Smalls. So, Ray, what do you have lined up for us today?
Well, Michelle, since the end of 23, there have been dozens upon dozens of articles that have been written and posted about, is DEI working? Is DEI functional? Is DEI even supported? And so, what? We've been trying to get people for what? Over a year now to try and
Over a
talk
year.
about this?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have two guests that are going to be helpful in us dissecting the issues of DEI. First one is Charmaine Brown, and she's the Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at United Way Worldwide, which is a nonprofit. She's responsible for advancing the United Way's global DEI strategy by developing, implementing, and managing both internal and external DEI practices, strategies, partnerships, programs, and initiatives. Ms. Brown is a member of the American Association for Access, Equity, and Diversity, and she co-chaired the American Mortgage Diversity Council. She's completed DEI leadership programs at the Harvard Kennedy School of Executive Education and Cornell Internal Labor Relations School, and has been recognized as a Diversity Journal Woman Worth Watching and a recipient of the National Urban League's prestigious McGannon Award for Relationship Management. David Sotolongo is the first ever Senior Director of DEI at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. He leads the company's Better Workplace strategy to embed DEI into the fabric of Regeneron by supporting the recruitment, retention, and professional development of all groups, especially underrepresented ones. He also chairs Regeneron's DEI Leadership Council, and David is certified in strategic workforce planning and is a member of the Human Capital Institute and the Society of Human Resource Management. And Michelle, just so everyone knows, full transparency, David and I, we've known each other for decades. Our families have known each other because his older brother and I were roommates at Princeton University. So we want to welcome David and Charmaine to the show today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So we'd like to ask each of you, in the aftermath, of George Floyd's murder, many institutions created DEI units or made statements of support for the Black community. So do both of you have a sense of whether those efforts have produced any lasting or significant change? And Charmaine, why don't we start with you first?
That is a really good question. Lasting or significant change? By some estimates, after the murder of George Floyd, corporations pledged, I think, anywhere between $50 billion to $200 billion to support, financial investments in minority-serving institutions and various other types of investments. The last number that I saw, which was 1.2 billion, had been distributed of the pledges made, would suggest to me that something is wrong with the level of commitment versus the action that followed. I will also say that the Congressional Black Caucus about 2 months ago sent a letter to these corporations that had made those commitments, those publicly stated commitments, asking for the receipts and asking them to report back on all of the actions that were taken after the death of George Floyd. So I do think that a lot of organizations experience perhaps sort of that corporate peer pressure where they felt the need to do something, but maybe they didn't have the real commitment in order to follow through. So if the numbers tell the story, it would seem to suggest that those commitments really lacked conviction.
What about from your viewpoint, David?
So I agree 100% with Charmaine. I would also add that prior to the murder of George Floyd, there were efforts, for example, the CEO in Action Pledge, which was a way for CEOs, again, pre-George Floyd, they were doing exactly the same thing. They were saying, we are going to take this action, not just that we're committed to diversity, but we're going to take these specific actions. And at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shamir, it's like at least 3,000 CEOs, 2,500 to 3,000 CEOs have signed on.
That's right.
And so what we see there is that even outside of what is now in the news, there has always been this effort. Whether it has been effective at all is another conversation, but for large corporations to sign on and say, we'll do something. So those actions, I was looking at the website recently. I don't think they've updated beyond, I think, 2022 to 2023. I was trying to dig to see what actions have been taken, because they've been putting on their website it's a collective, it's almost like a clearinghouse of actions that they have taken. They kept it, TWC put it together, but they left it very open for you to decide what actions can be considered for this effort.
Excuse me, David, for our listeners, TWC, what does that stand for?
PricewaterhouseCoopers, the consulting, the big consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one, and it's very disheartening. But and Charmaine will tell you, we've been around a while where we see efforts waxing and waning depending on the prevailing winds. But the other piece, which I see it from a glass half full perspective, is there are a lot of little points of light, if you will, of organizations that have been doing work regardless of what the noise is. One group that we're working with at Regeneron is called 110. I don't know if you've heard of 110, but they are an organization that they're committed to skills-based hiring for underrepresented groups. In other words, for those that are not college degreed, but have the skill set so that you could go back to an organization that says, okay, you're requiring this in your job description to have a college degree, but do you really need one? And so a bunch of organizations have already signed up for it. They're looking to have a million jobs over the next 10 years. And right now, in year number 3, they've been able to hire 100,000 through different companies, of course. And progress is not going to happen overnight. But again, this is ongoing effort, regardless of what you're hearing out there. And frankly, there's a lot of that out there that we should also consider, that it's not all doom and gloom, is my point.
Ray, can I just touch on a couple of points that David made? I do want to go back to
certainly.
Pricewaterhouse example, the PwC example, because I think what was interesting there, David is absolutely right. The last check, there were over 3,000 CEOs that had signed this pledge to do 4 very specific things as it related to DEI. What was particularly heartening about that was they also brought DEI professionals together. So there was this learning and engaging and providing of resources. If you go to the CEO in Action pledge today, if you sign that pledge, you still have access to all of those resources. And then every year they would do a day of understanding, and each organization that signed the pledge would do something to further the commitments and the goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that predated George Floyd, but Tim Ryan at PwC, who started that pledge, I think started that pledge after Mother Emanuel. So there was an impetus to that as well, where he sort of realized in that moment that he had a lot to learn about the Black experience. And so he, tells the story as to what led him to start the CEO pledge. And subsequently, all of the CEOs that signed had to do these 4 specific things in their organization, such as DEI training and launching various types of support groups. And so there were specific actions that you had to take. And then they also provided you with resources that enabled it. And that, as David said, predated George Floyd. So I would hate to think that a Black man or Black people would have to be murdered to have commitments made. But I just wanted to add a little bit more to that.
Okay, so that causes me to jump in and advance our question list a little bit. So the fact that you were both talking about CEOs of private corporations takes me to the Florida situation, where Governor Ron DeSantis actually had that Stop Woke Act bill passed that applied to not only schools, but to private corporations as well. Now, that's been now twice declared unconstitutional. But nonetheless, whether it ultimately gets to the Supreme Court or not, it has chilled the ability of companies in Florida to continue with their DEI efforts. So do you see any of that? Are you seeing CEOs being reluctant to go forward with their pledges because they're afraid of some kind of legislative or state backlash?
Michelle, I think you are referring to the fact that the federal appeals court ruled unanimously that the Stop Woke Act, right, was not constitutional. I think you're saying that.
Right. The panel did not. We have to see yet whether the full.
Right, whether it's, yeah.
Right.
But the point is, there's pushback to that. There's counter, right, to this Stop the Woke Act. I have not seen in my area any CEOs actually publicly say, you know, I mean, we're at United Way Worldwide. We're committed to DEI, right? We responded with some specific things after the murder of George Floyd, but the commitment was there before the murder of George Floyd. And I have not seen organizations publicly say that I'm working with that they're no longer going to do this work. But are they, you know, flying under the radar, if you will, to protect themselves, and in some cases to make sure that they can continue to do the work? I think some have just decided not to get into the fray and let the noise distract them, to keep the main thing, and they're continuing to do the work.
And I agree with that, Michelle, and also add from the corporation perspective, it's always good for all companies to do their due diligence, our company included, as to what is the law telling us? What is that's our North Star when it comes to employment law, EEOC, and all those things, to make sure that everyone feels that there's an equitable treatment just from the letter of the law. That's one side. The other side is that we could cite folks like Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase, or we can talk about Mark Cuban, who used to own the Dallas Mavericks, really saying, okay, if you all want to do that, there'll be more opportunities. Then that pool of talent is going to have to go somewhere. If they're not going to your corporation, they're going to go to ours. And that's kind of the spirit that I'm seeing. I know with our company, we're actually doubling down on these efforts. There's a lot going on where, you know, as we read and hear that companies are reducing their staffs, as you mentioned, et cetera. And we're going in the other direction. And maybe because we are a science company, from, you know, that's our little DNA is science. And our chief science officer, who's a co-founder of the organization, says science demands diversity, because you can't do science without that kind of thinking, whether it's diversity of thought or just using the Genome Project to make sure that you identify disease states from African ancestry, for example. That's part and parcel of what we do. So it's a lot easier maybe than, let's say, another company that doesn't have that kind of mission, let's say. But at the same time, as Charmaine said, there's pushback, and in a good way.
David, that's a really, really good point in terms of why it's important to your industry. But the premise is the same. You know, no matter the industry, diversity is destiny. And where we are today with the noise is sort of taking us away from what we're really talking about when we talk about diversity. As David's Mark Cuban example, which is the talent is going to go somewhere, right? So organizations who are doing diversity, real diversity, equity, and inclusion work understand the benefit. There's a moral and a business imperative to this work, right? And I think the organizations, as David said, that are clear about their North Star and the why they're doing what they're doing, I think they'll prevail. I think what we're seeing now is the politicization of the work, and the narrative around it is full of mendacity. There's just a lot of things that are being said that are quite frankly incorrect and don't represent the work and the intent of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, I can't imagine where that mendacity is coming from, but
Hey, wait, you mean to tell me that DEI is not responsible for the air plugs falling out on the Boeing planes? Is that what you're trying to say?
I am trying to say that there's a lot of mendacity taking root.
So David previously remarked that he's a glass half full kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go to myself, who was a glass half empty kind of guy, and point back to an article that the American Civil Liberties Union posted in January of this year. And they tracked far-right groups that have succeeded in getting 20 bills passed in over 40 states and the Congress, limiting DEI practices in higher education. So have either of you witnessed any effect by this type of pressure in your industry? And if so, what are some of the ways in which you've been able to combat them?
Yeah, I think that's a particularly important question too, given, David, that you said you use the law as your North Star, right? So as as efforts are made to actually change the law, like okay, Florida is the extreme example, but we've got states all over the place, and not all of them in the South, that are trying to do the same thing. So yeah, I'd love to hear you guys' answer on that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. One thing, it's we work with a lot of institutions of higher learning for different reasons, from the work that we do with HBCUs to we're working with a program on inclusive leadership with UC Berkeley, for example. So I converse with a lot of different stakeholders in the higher education community, and what I've been hearing, and I don't know the percentages, and maybe you all know, but they're also doubling down. They're saying, I don't care what these folks say. I mean, they're going to be thinking about and being careful, and having all the necessary people to help them guide them through it. But what I've been hearing is that we're going to keep going, and until somebody tells us otherwise. And I mean, I'm not as knee deep into all the things that they have to navigate in order to get to where they need to get to, but I just love that spirit. That's, it's almost like a sense of them saying that I'm not going to be intimidated. And that these legal challenges, although they're being struck down, it's not the challenges being struck down, it's the fact that the challenges are actually being put forward to get people this sense of, I don't know what to do. And that spirit of being kind of with a cloud over it will somehow stop things from happening if that's the strategy. Because it's happening. That's the same thing with all the legal challenges with corporations. It's like when you look through all the data and all the information, there is little mendacity in there, in that, how could this ever go through? But there's now that the doors are open to allow this to happen. I don't see it because I'm not in higher education, but what I'm seeing from the limited group that kind of is in my sphere, that they're not allowing it to stop them. So I don't know, Charmaine, if you've heard anything different, but it's not something like it's a rate limiting step for them. So that's been my feedback.
Yeah, I just think it's so ironic that, laws sometimes get it wrong, so, and the other thing that's kind of ironic about this is the mendacity around DEI really being about discrimination. And there's something inherently discriminatory about trying to push back on a discipline that's really about inclusion. So it's, my mind is kind of stuck on that. So I do a lot of DEI education, and that hasn't stopped. Leaders still want to know how they can lead inclusively in these uncertain times, or the military term, these VUCA times: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguous. So that hasn't stopped. And we have a United Way in Florida who just did something really bold. They actually just had a premiere of a documentary called Know Your Place that really talks about segregation in Florida and how some of the African Americans who are featured overcame some of those circumstances. And it kind of reinforces their commitment to this work. That documentary premiered with hundreds of people in Central Florida, and we also did it here at the United Way for our staff, and we had this wonderful conversation. So we're still educating our network, our people, about what it means to have a commitment to this work and what it means to foster a place where everyone can have a sense of belonging. And those aren't just words. We're actually doing work to ensure that that happens in spite of the things that are swirling around. We're staying committed. And, when we did the documentary, Know Your Place, I want to say this quote because we opened and we closed with what James Baldwin said, which is, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So this is about educating people and equipping people with the tools so that they know that things that were learned that is not serving them well and is not serving the goals of DEI can be unlearned, and to making that commitment to do that. Education has always been a good thing, and it's still a good thing.
I was just going to add one more item to that, and that has to do with something that James Baldwin also said. You can only teach people you love, meaning that you have to meet people where they are and apply knowledge and share knowledge empathetically, so that you pull people in instead of pushing, because the narrative is you're pushing stuff on us that we don't want. And that's just so far from the truth.
James Baldwin would not have gotten along with the MAGA crowd right now.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I'm just putting that out there.
Well, his documentary, I Am Your Negro, and all
Yes.
his
Yes.
whole life lets you know that. But boy, do we miss him.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. When I showed that film to my students, they couldn't believe that he was writing decades ago
Yeah.
because it
Like
was so timely.
Yeah.
And with the contemporary footage blended in, that just blew their minds. But let me ask you this. I've recently been talking to some people who are in nonprofit world. Their organizations have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on DEI training, learning how to be inclusive, and at the end of the day, when big decisions have to be made, they still want to rely, even after all that training,
Mm-hmm.
they still go to the same decision makers who are all white. So as you all work with different companies, and one of them happens to be an educational nonprofit, but as you work with these companies, how do you push gently move forward the leadership?
Nudge.
Because the nudge, okay, that's the word I'm looking for. How do you nudge them forward when they say they get it, but in practice they want to preserve that power and privilege that they have?
That's a really great question, because there is absolutely a fear of the status quo threat. And I will tell you, there's no easy answer, because that's not something that's going to change overnight. I believe we're making progress because of the way that we have guided our network, and the fact that we are led in the entire history of the organization. We are led by an African American woman. I think she has breathed a breath of fresh air into our nonprofit, and we are seeing change. We are not going back to it. It may be a dominant culture group because that's not going to change overnight. But because we're asking a different set of questions, because we're educating around expectations for the membership, we are seeing change incrementally. But again, that's not going to change overnight. But we're seeing signs of hope with our new leader and some of the things that she is putting in place for our network.
What I would add is we have to meet people where they are, as I mentioned before, with the James Baldwin quote, and that holds true for our senior leaders. So if people can't put themselves in your shoes, then it's hard to open the door up to talk about change, because if they don't see change as a problem, or that there's no problem to change, that there will be business as usual. And what we work on as much as possible, I just before this call, I did a 3-hour session on inclusive leadership to our people managers. And we were talking about putting yourself in other people's shoes before you can actually then say, these are decisions that I'm going to make that affect human beings. I'm a human being, and I have to start looking in my mirror and say, okay, what was it in my past that made me feel excluded or included, right? To really delve deep into those things before you can just go on ahead and, to me, that's a prerequisite for being a good leader, is to stop and think first about yourself. What is it that you need to do, to improve? Check your biases, your listening skills, your ability to be courageous by being humble, all of those things that not necessarily DEI parameters or traits. It's about being a good human and being a good leader. And that's what I focus in on. And that's resonated actually right up to our co-CEOs, because they have talked about their lived experience, in terms of their past and how they show up and where they come from, and shared it with the organization, so that it's not us versus them, because that's when leaders start to really hunker down and, because if they think that there's a threat, as opposed to, and, as Charmaine said, it doesn't happen overnight, but people have to start first, get that aha moment in their heads, because if they don't, it's always going to continue, because right now it's a wedge that's being created outside of, of our discussion here. It's a wedge, and by keeping people apart, it's keeping progress from being made. But I have a good friend, and you probably know him, Charmaine, Howard Ross.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I know him and Leslie.
And so Howard has been around the block. I think he was at the March on Washington, if I'm not mistaken, or at least
he
was, right? Anyway, so he's a Jewish heterosexual white male who's done more work around this effort. He's a walking history book around this. Mm-hmm. And we were at a meeting recently. I did a virtual meeting with the conference board. He was talking to CEO heads, et cetera. And he was saying the pushback that you see just demonstrates to you that it is working. That because if this work was not necessarily worth anything, people wouldn't care. But because there's making an impact, people are going to push back. If there was no pushback, there would be no effort. That means that we're not doing enough. It's a great way, to me anyway. Yeah. Again, Ray, glass half full guy talking.
Right. I love it though. I think we almost have to be that to do the work.
Yeah.
To get up every day and do the work. But what I just can't seem to wrap my head around, as somebody doing this work as you describe it, David, we're in this together. But what the work has become is not what we're talking about. What the narrative is that's being told is not what we're talking about. Like Michelle, you mentioned critical race theory, you teach it. After the murder of George Floyd, I think the other thing that happened, and it's impacting our ability today to kind of really focus on the fundamentals of DEI, what we were credentialed to do in DEI, is that all of a sudden, DEI professionals were now expert in race and in history and in structural racism and institutional race. And then we were just asked to take on these things that we were not credentialed to take on, going into organizations and having these really difficult conversations that the people being asked to do the work, we were not equipped to do it. And I think that hasn't necessarily served the discipline well. There is a place for that. We should be doing that work. But as David and I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and kind of our approach, where we are seeing incremental progress, DEI was making incredible progress and still is. And then all of a sudden, you hear things like DEI is woke, DEI is discrimination in reverse, all these things that it's not, that is interfering with our ability, in some cases to do the work. And your question, Michelle, is a very good one. And I will just say, when I look at things like the leader of NEEKC being a Black woman, Feeding America being a Black woman, Our United Way Worldwide, I mean, if you can see it, you can be it. And so we don't know all of the generations that could be inspired by what they're seeing today, that, at some point will manifest. It's almost like we've got to keep that hope, and we've got to know that there is a path forward, even in the darkest of night.
Okay, so I agree from the law side that you have to keep hope even when you know the law can't help. Let me just push a little bit on you guys, because you both spoke about incremental change. And that reminds me that that same sentiment was expressed in the 90s with the affirmative action programs, right? People felt, oh, we're making incremental change. It's good, boom. And then, 10 years later, there's no affirmative action officers anywhere. And again, I think it's interesting to note that Florida led that movement by the then governor, Jeb Bush, by executive order, ending affirmative action in Florida. And then it rippled out. And in fact, at the end, there were no affirmative action officers, right? So, so how do you see the DEI space as being different from what happened in the affirmative action space?
For me, it's grown and shifted so when you talk about affirmative action and what life was like during the initial times of affirmative action and to what we are confronted with today, the idea and the mindset of preferential treatment versus being all inclusive, I think that's been the different thematically what's changed. So how is it that, in my organization, what we look for all the time is an opportunity for everyone to be elevated by making sure that there's equity, and equity doesn't mean equality. Equity means that we want to make sure that everyone has an equal shot. So wherever that we see opportunities for everyone to have that equal shot, we will try to take it. So does that mean women exclusively should be on succession plans for senior leadership? No, but we know that if we provide everyone with the skills and tools to get to that level, whether you're a male or a female, all right, that's important. We also have to make sure that there's an element of what's important to a woman compared to a man, regardless of skin color, about their opportunities for growth. And is it that mentorship? Is it sponsorship? All right. Is it external connections and networks? Right. We provide that. We're opening doors for that. Then you can't say we're not doing it for another underrepresented group or not doing it for another group. We're saying that we're trying to elevate it all the way up. So some of it is semantics, frankly, because we always wanted to do that anyway. But when you look at it from a legal perspective, our company does a really good job understanding where the law is and what is our guardrails within that law. And then we work within that with them in order to make sure we're making progress. And what do we mean by progress? So we measure, and we have our DEI impact report. We had the first one, the first ever impact report last year, which was the year to the reporting year of 2022. In the next couple of weeks, we will be having our 2023 impact report published. And in there, you will see where we have made incremental progress. We have certainly work to do in all sectors, but we have an equal amount of men and women in the organization, albeit there's, obviously we're working on, women moving higher in senior leader positions within the organization, and that's happening as well. But also throughout all underrepresented groups and people of color. And so the goal is that when you see that incremental change for leaders, at least from a business perspective, they want to see the metrics, they want to see the numbers, and we're showing that, and we want to continue to do that through our different dashboards in DEI, as well as our demographic data, et cetera. So that's kind of what we're using because that's what leaders are used to. They're used to seeing those numbers, but those numbers have something behind that, and that's people, and that's engagement, and that's people deciding not to leave the organization and staying because it's it's a better place to work. There's that, those intangibles have to be kind of layered into that, because that's, to me, that's where really real change happens, the qualitative side of things. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult question, because the reality is I don't know sitting here today if what we're going through is similar to or outcome of what happened in the 90s with affirmative action. I would like to think that what we're going through will give birth to something even better than we have today. I know when I started in this space, and it's been 15 years now, specific to DEI work, it was about moving from obligation to opportunity. It was not about the minimum, making sure that we checked the box, that we had, 10 of this, it was really about initially access and legitimacy. How are we going to have access to these new markets and legitimize our role if we don't reflect that market and understand that market? And then eventually moving to, I think where we are today still is, this is the right thing to do and the smart thing to do from a business perspective. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I really am hopeful. I am optimistic that something really good is coming from where we are today in terms of DEI and where we eventually will go as a next step, right? As elevating the work and moving beyond the challenges that we have today. And I saw some interesting data. I wish I had it right at hand. But suffice it to say, I also saw some data by HR Nonprofit recently that basically said there are more organizations who have increased their commitment to this work. It was specific to nonprofits than is being represented in the broader, narrative with all the noise. It's almost like the noise is being overstated in order to suppress some of the truth and the reality about what's actually happening. It was very hard.
Just like the news, right? Just like the news.
Well,
all right. So Michelle and I are going to give you both a chance to do some good here, right? Because I was on the DEI ledge. I had 1 foot over and I was leaning backwards. Okay. But now we're going to make you two guys co-DEI chairman of the country. Okay. What sort of suggestions, advice, practices would you give regarding DEI to the overall public in our country?
Ooh.
Oof.
Are you still on the ledge? This isn't we're going to pull you off the ledge question, is it? You're off the ledge. No pressure.
Both of my feet are back on the ground. How about that?
This is where I wish I just kind of had that silver bullet. But what I will tell you is, I think you got to know your why and you got to stay the course. If you're short-sighted, right, and all you can see is kind of what's in front of you now versus, in other words, where the puck is today versus where the puck is going, then I don't know. You might be well off the ledge, but if I can tell you that where the puck is going is a good thing. I mean, the numbers are telling us, as I said before, Ray, diversity is destiny. I mean, if you start looking at the demographic shifts that are underway in the country, you know, in just a few short years, even the term minority, it's probably already obsolete, but will be obsolete. If you know that Gen Z is the most racially and ethnic diverse generation in the country's history,
Mhm.
and that this is what they want to work in places that are diverse. They want to live in communities that are diverse. And you're in business, you got to pay attention to that. And
Mhm.
if you know millennials are going into organizations that have a commitment to DEI and environmental social governance, right? Caring about climate change and environmental injustices, and you're running a business, you've got to pay attention to that. So I would say, don't just look at where the puck is today. Know your why, stay the course, and look at where the puck is going.
I couldn't have said it better. The only thing I would add also is, as DEI professionals, we're so steeped into the work that we have to step back and don't get caught up in things like, oh, they should know better, because not everybody knows better, and that we should always be constantly water dropping and making sure that they're getting what we're professing here, which is really a calling that we have. Because at the end of the day, this work, and the reason why I like this work, as exhausting as it is because it's more than just a profession, because there's so much that ties into, and Ray, you know, from my history, having been born in Cuba and coming to the United States and growing up in Harlem, there's a direct reason why this is important to me, but to other people, for wherever else they come from, everybody who's got a story, and everybody does have a story. And then the only other thing that I would add is that and I've hearing this recently quite often, is the level of, because of the level of commitment, there's a level of exhaustion associated with this work. And to make sure that you really focus in on your personal well-being, so that you can be able to live to fight another day, get the rest. And I think it was Howard Ross or someone else had mentioned about the analogy of a guy chopping wood. If that axe is not sharp, it's not going to be efficient, and you're not going to be able to cut wood as efficiently as if you take the time, sharpen it, and go do it. And many times, and I'm a culprit here, is that you just go. The what you get is, there's so much of what you get is to take the time to stop is really, really so important.
I love
I'm
that.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those. Yeah, go ahead, Shami.
No, I was just gonna say, I always think of Ovid when I hear those kinds of things. Take rest. A restful field gives a bountiful crop.
I gotta say, the young people have gotten that.
Yes,
The Gen Z people,
yes.
they understand that you can't go, and
Mhm.
that you have to stop, and that you have to have joy.
Yes.
Even when the work is soul crushing, you have to stop and revel with joy, right? So I have learned a lot from the young people, and you're sort of encapsulating a lot of what they have learned, I guess, from us. I don't know.
We
Yeah,
hope.
yeah. We hope.
I love that. That's
Yeah,
beautiful. Yes.
yeah. Well, you guys, those were great words to round up the show on. You're holding up the tradition of Nubian Tigers podcast by having been excellent guests. We just don't have guests that are not excellent.
Well, and also, as you know, when we talked off air before we started this episode, it has been a struggle finding people like you two who were willing to discuss DEI and its effect on the country over the
Yeah,
last 3 years, 4 years since 2020. And we want to really thank you guys for putting yourselves out there
yeah,
to
yeah.
talk about this important topic.
Thank you all.
Our
And
pleasure.
Michelle, I love the point about joy. Can I just say, Ray, before we end, just to pull the generations together? I don't know if anybody here remembers the gospel, I still have joy. after all the things I've been through. So I think that's kind of, the bookend, that generation with the Gen Zers.
I'm sorry, I didn't go to Sunday school, so
As you could tell, if you know Ray, that he missed those Sunday school.
Did miss those? Oh dear, Ray. David, I know you went to Sunday school. You're gonna have to tell Ray about that.
Yeah, I was an altar boy, so I've been there.
Oh no, David, I know your story. Trust me, I know your story.
You guys, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you all.
It was great talking to you. And I'm with Ray. I'm usually on the ledge on these things, but I find your words very inspiring.
Well,
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Have a great one. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So Michelle, I'm talked off the ledge. Okay, I think we were both on the ledge, but I'm back on solid ground again, and it's interesting because I've been doing some DEI work at my old private school, and the work is not easy. If you're committed, you have to stay committed. If this is what you want to do, it takes work, it takes money, it takes access, and I think that folks out there just need to understand it's just not going to continue without people's support.
Right. And I know folks are getting tired. We're under such an onslaught. Charmaine kept using the word mendacity.
Yes. That's the word for the show.
The folks lying about what's going on.
Right.
But and truthfully, Ray, I'm not a person who favors incremental change, but in some ways, change does happen slowly. Sometimes you can't see it, and it's often years down the road that you're able to tell what actually changed. But the point I took from all of it is that people still have to have hope, and so that's what I'm gonna.
Well, my glass is kind of empty or it's kind of full right now. I'm still not certain, but yeah. I'm gonna be there. Trust me, I'm gonna be there.
Okay, if you like what you heard today, follow us on our website, www.nubiantigerspodcast.com, where you can get additional information about the show. And don't forget to check out our resource pages while you are on the site. You can find our podcasts on YouTube on the Nubian Tigers Podcast channel. And if you have a favorite podcast app, we're probably on it. Look for Nubian Tigers Talk. Looking forward to sharing some knowledge with you next time.
Wake up, wake up, wake up.